very proud to be here with some amazing people. And again, because we had already started this whole thing, and so I'm going to start again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an amazing panel. Dr. Yael Danieli is a clinical psychologist, victimologist, and pioneer traumatologist, and she founded the International Center for the Study, Treatment, and Prevention of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma. She's the director of the Group Project for Holocaust Survivors and Their Children, and has done an enormous amount of psychotherapeutic work with survivors and their offspring. She was a consultant to South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Rwanda's government on the reparations for victims. She worked in Northern Ireland, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in 2008, she was appointed the advisor on victims of terrorism for the Office of the United Nations Secretary General, my friend Dr. Yael Danieli. Stephen Lutzen served as a charter member of the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, a presidential appointment, and he was a member of the original President's Commission on the Holocaust during the Carter administration. And that created the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. He was the only child of survivors on both original presidential panels. He's also served as a member of the New York Holocaust Memorial Commission, which created the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City, and he's the founder of the Remembrance of the Holocaust Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Stephen Lutzen. The playwright of the two plays that we presented this afternoon, Eleanor Risa is Brooklyn-born and bred, a Tony-nominated director, a Broadway actress, prize-winning playwright. She was the artistic director of the world's oldest Yiddish theater company. She's a soon-to-be-published author, a singer in every major venue around the world, including Carnegie Hall, Town Hall, and Joe's Pub and Michael Feinstein's 54 Below. She became a storyteller in English and Yiddish, and is the daughter of her parents who lived through the Holocaust. And many of her experiences as a child of survivors have found their way into her amazing work. Today we showed two plays, the last one, an epilogue, and The Last Survivor, my dear, dear friend, Eleanor Risa. Stacy Seance is a lawyer whose grandparents survived the Holocaust, and their stories of survival have profoundly influenced her outlook and inspired her commitment to sharing all the stories and lessons of the Holocaust with future generations. She served as a founding member of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's New York Next Generation Board and sits on the museum's education committee. She's been heavily involved with the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, and she serves as a trustee there. She also serves on the board of the Auschwitz Jewish Center Foundation, and in 2014, they honored Stacy and her husband, Mark, at their annual gala. She's also the co-chair of the Town of Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee. Now, she shares her passion for educating the next generation with her children, who were featured in the HBO documentary, The Number on Great Grandpa's Arm. And that documentary details her grandfather's story of survival through a conversation with her son, Elliot, and his great-grandfather. So we're talking 4G now. She's 3G. Her son is 4G. And the Museum of Jewish Heritage produced an exhibition in partnership with HBO based on that documentary, The Number on Great Grandpa's Arm, not only showcasing the film, but the animation by a great artist named Jeff Scher. I'm very proud to introduce a new friend of YI, Stacy Seance. Thank you, Stacy. And last but certainly not least, Leah Volinets was born to Holocaust survivors from Poland. She was a public school teacher and administrator in the public school system in New York. Her educational background helped her to go on to help create Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation. To honor the millions of children lost during World War II In 1994, she created the Golden Bridge of Friendship, a nonprofit designed to match orphans from Eastern Europe with adoptive parents. And that model that she developed is now used across the globe. She served as coordinator for the Jews of Częstochow exhibit and the outreach manager for the Polin Museum in Warsaw, which is an amazing museum for the Jewish history of the Jews in Poland. She currently acts as the executive director of the worldwide Częstochowa Jews, their descendants, and she is the secretary of the Częstochowa Relief Society, one of our sponsors. And today at 2, we actually had a wonderful program, which you can go back to YouTube and Facebook and watch. My dear friend and a member of the board of directors of the Yiddishkeit Initiative, Leah Volanitz. So we are now all here. And I just want to get right into it because we started late. This idea that, Eleanor Risa wrote these amazing plays about, from her perspective as a child of survivors. And one of those plays is actually called The Last One, an epilogue. And it depicts the last Holocaust survivor and how he is now the last one to tell the story. But my question to all of you is, what do we do when that horrible day arrives and there is no longer a last one? What is the future of Holocaust awareness? And Yael, you were kind enough to start before we were live to tell us about today's anniversary. Could you please repeat that for us?
Yeah, just to make the historic connection that today is the anniversary of the Rwanda genocide. And
so
the reason I'm thinking of it is that when we speak about lessons for the future, we of course, we must put the lessons of the Holocaust, but also as its legacy to teach and learn from other genocide and genocide groups and help them too, based on the lessons we've learned too. And perhaps we can repair the world together.
I think
we can talk more about that, but I know Steve is very anxious to remind us that we've gone a long way. Go ahead.
Well, that's what, and I feel as if we had a little dress rehearsal here, but in any event, I'll repeat how much I enjoyed Eleanor's 2 dramatic productions. I especially enjoyed the early one at 5 o'clock. I said, because those are people that I heard and knew and loved. And as I said, there was even a little bit of humor. And I think that's also critical in this whole endeavor. And I remember that the meeting we had in it was the old executive office building of the White House. And at the end of the meeting, after spending literally, I would say, the morning and the afternoon with all the members of the people who were trying to plan what shape the memorial would take in Washington, or even whether it would be in Washington. And I always liked when Elie Wiesel wrapped up the day, he said, I don't know what we accomplished, but we all said, oi. And that being said, we actually did accomplish a great deal. And when I say we, that all the members of the panel, variety of backgrounds, same with New York. I was involved with that one too, but not as much. But either way, we have bricks and mortar, and that will last past our lives. And the position of both these places in itself speaks volumes. And that therefore, unless someone comes along and decides to literally smash these buildings, and God forbid, that story will be told. And not to monopolize too much, but I can't help but commenting a little bit about a little mini debate today with Eleanor and Avi about the idea of, I think you know what I'm going to talk about, right? The Holocaust holograms. And from my standpoint, much as I don't disagree, Eleanor, about did these people agree that they would become holograms someday? And the answer is no, because they probably didn't know what holograms were. But what I did learn is that you really have to be pragmatic. And I think it was Isaac Bashevis Singer, he said there's a difference between the Yiddish language, there's a difference between being a dead and dying. And in the sense that at least there's something that people can turn to, because they won't be able to speak to survivors because they're no longer alive. So the idea that we could use artificial intelligence, and I happen to love technology, but for the idea that there can be that interactivity, and I guess what I'm saying is that that's the best you can do. But that being said, look at all the volume of testimonies that were the Spielberg Foundation and catalog the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, and then Eleanor, you mentioned repeatedly, was it I forget the name of the foundation, but
the Fortunoff Video Archive.
Right. So that there's that whole library. These things didn't exist, and the idea that, and of course, and film. Obviously, to me, Schindler's List is one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. And so I guess where I'm going is that, fortunately, because of the sheer annihilation, and the idea that Israel was born, which I always believed wouldn't have happened but for the Holocaust, and then the idea that people could rebuild their lives, and luckily in the 50s the economy was a little bit better, so our lives were actually beautiful lives in America, but that luckily transitioned into collecting all that pain and all that suffering and all that displacement, and then to channel that and to come up with something so powerful, that being the museums, the artistic works. Eleanor, your work was as moving as many things I've seen that had a much grander scale. And that's part of the problem with the Holocaust, is that you're dealing with something that's such a massive macro level that you can't get your arms or your head around it. And yet it's the small stories that have almost as much power, or let's say equal power, because that's where you bring back the humanity. And so that's, I guess, some of my thoughts.
So let me pick up right there, because we're talking about Eleanor. And Eleanor, if you could talk for a second about when you were writing these pieces, was there ever a thought about its educational value as an artistic project? Because yes, there are museums and people will go to museums, and that's great, but we can reach people in many ways. We can reach them through music, we can reach them through theater, we can reach them through film, Stephen mentioned. So was that ever part of your consideration? And if not, how do you feel about using the arts as a way to continue the future of Holocaust awareness?
Look, I mean, I wrote those pieces as a personal need. It was not, I did not do it for the greater good. I did it for the good of my deceased people. I did it, it's a kind of minimally funny thing about The Last Survivor. The Last Survivor, when I wrote it, was meant to be about the father. And invariably, the world of workshops and people sticking their fingers into your art, and the development of the piece, everybody kept saying, no, Helen is the last survivor. And I'm like, no, it's not about Helen. This play is not about Helen. But of course it was about Helen, but that was not my intention. And it's actually never my intention, but it is always about me. And that, as I say, it's not my intention. So I did not think of it as an educational piece. However, when it was done in Chicago, there were schools that came, and there was a booklet that went to the schools. And I thought, I can't tell you how that made me feel, how, like, there was a questionnaire that said, how do you think Haskell Schlisselberg managed to survive? And I thought, oh my God, they're talking about my father. My father is part of their curriculum. So that was in the 90s. Now, in a way, like the last one, I'm ready to go into a zoo. You know what I mean? I feel like there's nothing I'd rather do than educate people about the Holocaust and about how the Holocaust is the same, except with other colors and other genders and other particulars about other people. So it was not my intention. It was my intention to honor my family, who I missed enormously. Right. That was my intention. But right now, I'm ready to do anything.
So I want to bring Leila.
Because you heard that I'm a psychologist, allow me. It was not your conscious.
Thank you. Hey, did I ever pay you? Because I feel like I paid everybody but you. I have given up so much money to fix this, and I never sent you a check. Dan, Mom.
Darling, you're a blessing. Your plays are all the payment we need.
But I want to bring Leah and Stacy into the conversation because I think there's a lot here that we still need to cover. So number one, I mentioned before our technical difficulties were discovered that there are only 17 states in the United States of America that mandate Holocaust education, and one of them that I know of right here in the state of Florida, even though it's mandated, apparently it's totally unfunded. So even though every class in Florida is supposed to learn about the Holocaust, they don't really. So my question to Stacy and Leah is, number one, how can we get to a point where we mandate this education throughout the United States? Why should there be students who don't learn? And to Yael's point, how do we teach not only the Holocaust, but the concept that genocide exists? It existed before the Holocaust, it existed during the Holocaust, it exists after the Holocaust, and it exists today.
And it exists everywhere.
Yes, and all over the world. And finally, how can we utilize the museums that are now abundant? Thank God, thankfully, there are now museums everywhere for Holocaust. How do we bring plays and concerts and poetry and different forms of artistic expression into that educational paradigm? So Stacy, you want to, jump on in as a 3G. I'm so fascinated by your perspective here.
Sure. And I wanted to add a point from your first question too, just because I always think about, when you said what happens when the last survivor is no longer here. And I always think about the quote from Elie Wiesel that when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. And so I, think that, yes, when the survivors are no longer here, the 2Gs, the 3Gs, the 4Gs, it becomes our responsibility, and anyone who has heard, who's had the opportunity to meet and hear a survivor speak, it becomes our, responsibility to then share those stories and kind of stand in their place and educate. So that's the first question. I agree with you. Unfortunately, even in states where there are mandates, it depends on the teacher you have. You can have a teacher who, I know even in our school district, we have 2 middle schools, and depending on the teacher you have, you could learn.
Where are you, Stacy? Where are you?
Chappaqua, New York. You could learn, for a couple of weeks about the Holocaust, or you could just get a sentence. So I think what it is, I'm the co-chair of our town's Holocaust and Human Rights Committee. And I think it's just about engaging the teachers, because the more teachers you can engage, even if it's mandated, if you can engage teachers and get them excited about something, then it's going to happen in the schools. And so what we've done in our town is we have an annual Holocaust essay and art contest. And so, we've reached out to the art teachers. So we just got all of our submissions. And so the graphic art teacher, the art teacher at the high school, she had her whole class submit. And then, there's so many people who, learn through, they're more creative, right? And so they're writing poems. And then there's those who learn, are really successful at writing essays. And so just trying to reach people where they are and encouraging different types of teachers. It doesn't just have to be taught in history or in English. If you can engage the art teacher, on the topic. So I think that's it. The important thing is that trying to reach people where they are and not just think of it as we can only educate people in history class.
Right. Leah, I'm curious, you can unmute yourself and tell us your thoughts on...
Well, first, yeah, okay. I have a few thoughts, and I actually wrote something that I was supposed to say this morning, so I guess I get to say it now, and it begs your point, which is slowly throughout the generations, we learn through conflict, and That's what we have to do. We have to keep telling the stories. We have to keep telling the stories. In terms of larger picture, we have to include the people who have also had conflicts, obviously, the people who have genocide. Also, we have to include Europe. We have to have more connections with the European. There are many organizations now that are very, very into keeping the culture. The Yiddish, being Jewish and the Yiddish culture is very in right now. And that is what I feel is what we have to use to go on. Okay, that's my shtick. Okay, but the education and the fact that there's no money for things, I mean, that's a big problem all the way around. But there are organizations that are doing things, that are doing legislation. I think his name is Eisner. I'm not sure of his name, but he's on my Facebook, and I always say I'm going to help. You have to do more legislation. You have to go to the governments. You have to insist that there has to be things that are be done. I mean, that's the way to do it. The knowledge is written in all of us. The knowledge is written in all of us. We have to be able to share it in a way. Now, I have to tell you that Stacy's movie is a wonderful movie, and that is the kind of thing that you need as a former teacher. You have to include the kids on their level. Okay, you have to include it as comic books, not heavy duty stuff. You got to comic books, anime, whatever else you want. And that's why I'm so proud of Stacy, because she included her children, and she spoke to children. And it wasn't a dire thing. It was a story that needed to be told, and in a way that the children understood. And that, I think, needs to be continued. It has to be done in that way.
So Stacey, I actually saw your documentary.
And I can't take credit. Amy Schatz and Sheila Nevins were the producers and creators. I just provided the family members.
You just provided the children that you happen to have. That's okay.
And the story, and your grandfather. And,
yeah, of course.
And it's an extraordinary piece. But I think my question, and Lael, I'm going to let you answer and get to your point. You know, I think blessing is also a double-edged sword. There are so many museums. There are so many Jewish organizations. There are so many different places, and yet there's very little, if any, coordination between these. Leah, you're going to have to mute yourself again. So the struggle for funding, the lack of coordination, how do we bring all these disparate elements together so that not everybody is only working in their own little corner of their little area, and we can all coordinate the work that, you know, for instance, very quickly, one of our sponsors is the University of Miami. They created a Holocaust theater database, which is trying to collect every single piece of theatrical art that is related to the Holocaust. It exists, but nobody's really utilizing it. Nobody is using it. No one is utilizing. So Yael, do you want to speak to the psychology of all these different Jewish organizations that can't work together?
I wanted first to respond to Stacy, to ask Stacy, you know that Yad Vashem used to have courses for teachers regularly. I actually used to be one of the teachers of those teachers. Do you have those too in the museum here? Because it should be a function of such centers.
Yes, both the Museum of Jewish Heritage and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum both offer several classes and courses for teachers and throughout the year and in the summertime. And I think that that's an important resource. I know that the museum in DC has the Balfour Conference every year, and due to COVID, it was actually a blessing because they could only have, I think, I forget what it was, like maybe a couple hundred people attend. But then because of COVID and it went online, they were able to have thousands of people. And so I do think that going forward, because of what happened during COVID and seeing how these museums are able to reach so many more people. I know the Museum of Jewish Heritage, when they have events now, it's not just people in New York, it's people all across the country. And so I think that will help us and help, teachers who otherwise wouldn't be able to travel to different places to be able to take these courses. And, the Shoah Foundation has, I think it's Echoes and Reflections. And these are free, resources and curriculum resources for teachers. So there's so much out there. And I think it's just a matter of, getting the teachers engaged and actually just knowing that it exists.
Well, one way of doing that, since Avi and I spoke yesterday about the fact that I'm in the vulnerable to COVID category, which it was number one, so it was old. But so I was reflecting when Stephen was talking. My first doctoral dissertation many years ago was on the psychology of hope. It was because I interviewed Holocaust survivors as main subjects to teach me about what hope is about, as well as many other populations, that I actually changed it. Why? Because at the time, my doctoral committee said, survivors don't talk to anybody. Why do you think they'll talk to you? I'm talking in the 60s, okay? Mm-hmm. Steve, before 80s, before you started the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful museum work. So I changed. And I believe in studying and working where people are, not in the laboratory or in artificial conditions. So I shared your hologram worries, Eleanor. But
I want to jump in for just a second, because Stacy, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we actually have at least two lawyers on this exam.
Right. Except so if you let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you finished.
No, I absolutely didn't finish. So what I learned from Holocaust is, so I used to go to survivors' homes with Yafa Eliach. She and I taught at Brooklyn College at the time. and of course, they put me in the kitchen. And of course, I would rarely leave before the next morning. Because those people who were supposed to never talk to anybody finally had somebody that wanted to hear them. So it was a strange world then, where survivors barely existed as the voice of their own experience. Remember that. I remember how few books there were. Ellie, of course, was totally available books in person, but it was amazing. I mean, my library was a tiny little thing in those days. And that's why we built the first program to help Holocaust survivors and their children in the world. Can you believe that? And that was in 1975, 30 years after the war. Now, what is important in what I want to make the connection, also the museum and to the lawyers here, is I have many hats. One of them is expert in victims and trauma in general. But one of the things I got committed to then, actually, it was that year that determined the rest of my life. It was very clear, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this, we have to do this. And what became very important, and that's part of why I became involved with the United Nations, is we created, and I feel that, Steve, as much as the museums, we created, I have the privilege and honor to have participated in creating all victims' rights, international law victims' rights instruments that exist in today's world. And so when we are proud of the accomplishments, let's remember that edifice, the edifice of victims' rights. And it came directly from Holocaust survivors. People don't necessarily know that.
That picks up on the optimism and the hope, which is really all you can rely on. Otherwise, you'll be overwhelmed. One. And two is that I was saying about being lawyers, that the idea of a rebuttal. So, Avi, you very rightly state how in some ways the situation seems to have deteriorated. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. We had the far-right groups.
True.
And if I may interject, for the last 40 years, I was going to this rotunda in the Capitol for the annual Holocaust ceremony. So I thank you, because we can't do that now, although there is one virtually. But I was saying that a small group creates that sense of belongingness, that sense of going forward. But what I mean about rebuttal is that we have the opportunity to speak up. And not only that, think about this. The fact that we could get together, do this video, and just talk to each other and have it be worldwide. We're starting to take all these things for granted. And yet this didn't exist, as Yael said, years ago. And I want to do it, as they call a shout out, because I feel such a closeness to Yafa Elia, because one of the reasons I
miss her terribly.
Right. But and this is something I want to bring up, Stacy, as a 3G. You'll find this as you get older. And I think a lot of us 2G people feel this. One of my friends said to me once, we were out in East Hampton. I was at the beach. It was a nice, beautiful day. And he walked up to me and said, "Lutsen, you're haunted by the Holocaust." And I thought, wow, I never thought of it that way. And the other thing that was a commentary is that one of the children of survivors, she said, the Holocaust was a member of our family. I said, she's right, or he's right, whoever said it. But I guess what I'm thinking is that because we're haunted by the Holocaust, and because there are actually so many opportunities, but again, the lawyer in me, the rebuttal. So, for example, I'm just going to use one anecdote, and that is last week there was a town outside of Boston called Duxbury, appropriate name, and the football coach was using as part of the audible, what they call it when they hike the ball, 179 Brooklyn, Auschwitz. So I went ballistic. I wrote a letter to the Boston Globe. They didn't publish the first one. So I wrote another one. They published the second. But my point was that we had the chance to speak up, and there's going to be mandatory legislation in Boston now because of this incident. So I guess where I'm going is that you have to take those circumstances and jump on them and be relentless and take the spirit. And I say this with, utter respect and also I've never understood how any of these people actually made it through the Holocaust. But one of the things we learned is about having grit and being relentless and having hope. Because if you didn't have hope, you were finished. And so where I'm going is that there is hope, and the idea that we can take advantage of opportunities that just literally didn't exist until today. And yet, because we can disseminate hope and remembering the Holocaust, the haters can disseminate denying the Holocaust and more hate. So it's becoming a giant pressure cooker, but we got to use the pressure.
Well, let me jump in for a second, and then I'll open it up again. So you bring up several very valid points, obviously, but this idea that, again, I want to keep coming back. 17 states mandate Holocaust education, which means there's a hell of a lot more that don't. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. Anti-Semitism is on the rise not only in the United States, but all over the world. On January 6th, the Capitol was overtaken. There was a guy wearing a Club Auschwitz. You mentioned Auschwitz? Club Auschwitz. The Proud Boys and the anti-Semites are running rampant. What are we going to do? How do we coordinate the efforts to fight against these things in a way that is not just intermittent or individual to any one museum or any one little program or any one school or any one play?
It's a really complicated question, Avi. I mean, you're asking, look, we don't teach slavery right? I mean, you're saying the Holocaust, we don't teach the American Indians. Forget the Jews for a moment. Yes, Jew, forget us for a minute and just think about American history.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many states legislate. I learned about slavery, but I didn't learn about slavery. I learned about Indians, but I didn't learn about Indians.
Right.
So you have to read Howard Zinn's book, but you can't legislate Howard Zinn's History of America. So on a certain level, like batting against 17 states and the Holocaust, to me is it's a bit of a non-issue, no offense. The issue, though, that you do raise that is how do we unify? And that to me, that's all. That's the question. It's the same. How did we get 2 Democratic senators in Georgia?
Yeah.
So how did Stacey Abrams, how did we elect Joe Biden? How did we do that? We utilize something. It's a similar struggle in my mind. I think, batting the 17 states to me is just a little bit hoyech and not really anything that, how many states teach Indians? I mean, how do we unify the database? So somebody's looking for information. So there's the Shoah, there's University of Miami, there's this, and Arkansas has a Holocaust museum whose database is not connected to. I'm just saying
That's exactly right.
To me, that's a real question.
Okay, Eleanor, I'm 100% with you, by the way, and that's why I'm actually formally inviting you to be participants in the International Center for the study, prevention, and treatment of multi-generational legacies of trauma, because we are working indeed not only with survivors and survivors offspring of the Holocaust, but also with the Black community and the Indigenous community, and on and on and on. And I actually created the only scientifically valid measure. It's called the golden measure, the gold measure of assessing multi-generational legacies of trauma. And yes, it started and was validated on Holocaust survivors' offspring. But it's now being validated on Gypsy, on Roma in Hungary, and it's being utilized in Bosnia and in Kosovo and on the in border with Mexico.
And the Uyghurs.
It's already 20 languages. So Avi, part of what I'm saying, I very much share your hurt that we are so dispersed and split apart. I totally share that. And I think if the Jewish community did not learn that we have to stop splitting always from the Holocaust, I don't know what will teach us.
Right.
But Israel has more political parties than the letters in the alphabet.
Right.
So it's part of being. It's big. What you're raising is an amazing mystery that's been plaguing me too. I totally understand. Right. So that's why I said, okay, let's all get together.
Let me just jump in here for a second. I think, I don't think it's such a bad thing that there's so many different museums and organizations that are creating curriculum all across the country, because, the teachers in Arkansas are going to look to the resource in their state that's there to help them. And, the teachers in Maine are going to look to their, so I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do think that, the message that needs to be sent out is that learning about the Holocaust teaches you how to be able to see, there's certain steps. The Holocaust wasn't just one event. It was all these little steps, right? And that's what, when we're looking at what's happening in today's world, you can see steps to say, this is a genocide that's about to happen. And so I think it's connecting why it's so important to learn about the Holocaust to today's current events. And if we can get more teachers to see that connection, I think we'll be, a little maybe more successful in getting it into the schools, because it brings it to today and why it's important.
Right. No, I hope I didn't give the impression that I thought it was bad. I think it's wonderful.
No, I sort of indicated that I was sorry for the lack of sharing databases, and it's also about this rush for money that is such a struggle creatively and probably intellectually and culturally, is everybody's trying to grab the dough to keep their organization alive.
And once upon a time, the United Jewish Appeal was an umbrella organization that gave money to most of the Jewish organizations that were out there. But over the years, it evolved into territorialism, where each group was holding out for its own couple of dollars, its own donors, and don't touch mine, and I won't touch yours, and you can't touch this, and you can't touch this. So, the idea that, but I want to get back to the idea.
I think Leah has something. Do you?
Yeah, and I'm going to.
We've managed to shut you up, Leah, because of your horrible sound system, but it's not right.
Actually, Leah, at a minimum, you should try to adjust the volume a little lower.
Yeah. Yeah. And back away from your mic just a little bit. But again, I want to get back to this idea that, is there a way to bring ourselves together in a way that can help to coordinate the efforts of all of these amazing different places? An international portal, a website that has all of the different places around the world working in this particular field, a network that is dedicated specifically and exclusively to the telling of these stories. The number on Great Grandpa's arm is a beautiful piece. There should be an entire network dedicated to programs that tell these stories from all over the world.
Well, let me jump in, because actually, ironically, Avi, that's how I met you and Yael. The three of us were on a panel, and Mark Golub of the Jewish Broadcasting Service. So I thought that's supposed to serve a function similar to that, is it not?
He disappeared immediately. Yes, but he stayed in touch with you, right?
Well, a little bit. I mean, interviewing me, that was very nice. But I guess where I'm going is that I guess what I'm saying is that we don't really have to reinvent the wheel. It sounds like we just have to put the wheel on the same vehicle. Not to be simplistic, because as we speak, I had that flashback to that horrible episode in Charlottesville. Jews will not replace us. So instinctively, I think about, kind of a 1,000,000-man march. I mean, maybe we get 1,000,000 Jews to show up someplace and just to say we're unifying around what? We're unifying about the fact that we're going to still be here. That's it. Mir sign and up. That's it.
Good luck with that. We can't
exactly, because the old joke is that
agree to get together for lunch at the same time.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, the old story is the only thing that two Jews can agree upon is how much the third one should contribute. But and I've lived all this stuff. But I guess where I'm going is that maybe what we could take away from this is the idea that we could start trying to quote unify the Jewish community, or in effect put all the splinters together to create a, quote, mosaic that somehow will create enough of a collective so that people see that we may not be unified internally, but to the outside world, there's a force. Okay, so that's a thought.
I want to give Leah a chance to jump in, please. Leah?
Reduce the volume.
Yes.
I've already forgotten half the things that I wanted to say. Okay. But
Leah, back away from
it's me.
No, it's not you. You're too close to the computer. Now.
Okay now? Am I okay now? Okay.
Better.
Good. I'm going to go back to my original discussion. First of all, I think we need more Avis, and I think we need more cultural events, and I think we have to concentrate on the oral traditions, and that is the way that we transfer our culture, and that is in every culture. One of my Facebook people are Native Americans. I read it every day, and all of their teachings are very much like ours. Okay, and I think that we have to connect with all the other kinds of people that are like us because they're humans. Okay, and through that kind of teaching and that kind of art in form of plays, in culture, in telling our stories, that is what I can see is the helpful thing to do. I mean, it sounds funny to say more obvious, but you're right. There should be one group, two groups, that are doing this. But unfortunately, that's going to be a hard thing, especially with Jews, of course. 3 Jews, 5 pennies. But again, I want to go back to my original contention, and I think that that is the way we have to teach what is important to the next generation. That's what I think. As a teacher, I had all the great resources in the world, but if I didn't have a vehicle to how to give it to them, then what difference would all those resources make? You have to open up the vehicles. You have to open up the ways to go. I mean, I don't know if I'm making any sense at all, but this is what I'm going to stand for. It's the way I look at it, and that's where I think it has to go.
So reference to that, and Yael, I'll let you go next. We have been teaching a certain paradigm ever since we started teaching these things, which is this concept of tolerance. Teach tolerance. We said, let's teach tolerance.
No, I'm against.
But I think we are on the wrong track. We need to be teaching acceptance, tolerance,
respect, acceptance. How do we change the paradigm of the educational system? How do we go from, tolerating people to actually teaching young people from the time they're in preschool? Forget about Holocaust education. We should be mandating respect and acceptance education and using the stories of the Holocaust and using the stories of the other cultures to be able to get those messages across. So tolerance versus acceptance or respect. Yeah. Respect is more than that. And by the way, there's a new book, fantastic book. Amazing. I don't have it here because somebody grabbed it. An educator grabbed it immediately. It's done by 2 Jews, and it's called How Do We Educate? How do we raise A+ human beings?
Oh,
okay. But that's again, we are a network. I have a huge network, and we have in our network, we have a list of related links, which is the richest thing ever. And please bring more. And we have the richest library. Okay. And you can simply go in and find it. And please, and we live because we say to everyone, please, whichever book we are missing, please write to me immediately. Whichever play we are missing, Eleanor, write to me immediately. Whichever film you're missing, it's multidisciplinary. Okay. Eventually, we want to give grants for research. And
who is we?
International Center for Multidisciplinary Legacies of Trauma. And since I'm here with you, it's my email is the easiest. Yael D, right? Yael and D for Danieli at AOL.com. And every day we put news, we take news from all over the world. Now, I would be totally guilty if I didn't mention the United Nations, because tomorrow is not International Holocaust Day.
No, that's
it's Holocaust Day as the Jews observe it. International Holocaust Day is January 27th. And it was quite an achievement to get it at the UN. I'm proud to be part of that miserable push, but it's there, and they have amazing programs.
Mm-hmm.
And every part of your dreams about, and Leah, part of your dreams about having educational programs, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
They have actual people whose full-time job is to do this.
Right.
You know, we are all a little bit here, a little bit here, and a little bit there. Of course, these are full-time jobbers.
Right.
I just learned in the last 3 weeks that the first documentary on how do you call it, marine digging, that's about finding the boats of the slaves.
Yes.
Is done by a child of survivors. Hello. The first, this is extraordinary what offspring do. Amazing stuff. Really repairing the world. Really on a daily basis. The same way your plays do. The other one also. It's like mind-blowing when you actually listen to who is doing this work. They're children of survivors doing all this. It's amazing. I get so goddamn proud.
Right. So much going on.
But so I would actually I'm connected to those. And I can give you the links. You can also be connected to them, and you are informed of all the programs. They are intellectually satisfying. You always learn something new.
So let me jump in for a second, and then we're going to reach our final conclusions, or at least our final thoughts. I never imagined for a minute that we were going to sit here at 9:00 at night and solve the world's problems and come up with the solutions. But I wanted to hear the thoughts of people who know what they're talking about. This group of 5 people on our screen right now, every single one of you is an expert in your field. And so I'd love for us to finish our panel discussion here with each of your thoughts about where we can go with this, about how we can maybe coordinate, about how we can create a fund that supports the work of more than just one organization. How can we create a network? How can we create a portal? Where do you think we need to go? And if it's holograms, then so be it. I mean, Eleanor and I had a very long conversation about the holograms. I'm on the fence. And for those of you out there who don't know what we're talking about, the artificial intelligence.
I'll repeat that.
Artificial intelligence has gotten us to the point where you can bring back, holograms of Holocaust survivors who have passed away, who can literally sit in a room and answer questions.
And hock you a chinik, like the old days. I mean, get your own Holocaust hologram and let them hock you a chinik.
Hey, you can rent a yente. There's a rent a yente system.
We have Pesach, right? We just had Pesach.
Yes.
Do you need the hologram of the rabbis?
I don't.
In the Haggadah.
But you know what, Stacy? I want to hear your take on this because Eleanor and I talked about it. We are living with a new generation. Their attention span is short. They're not going to necessarily watch a film or read a book or watch a play. But is the answer to give them a hologram that they can talk to?
Well, I have to say, I was, when I first heard the concept, I was a little skeptical, but I have to say, I actually, have experience sitting down and talking to the holograms. And you actually forget that it's not a real person. I mean, and I'm one of those people, I was such a skeptic, and it is so powerful. You can just come up with any question and they're actually responding to you and answering to you, so much so that you forget you are not talking to a real person. And I think that that is such a powerful tool for this next generation who may never, ever meet a survivor face to face. Because
Okay, but let me correct you, because I think they are real people. They're just not alive.
well, some of them are
Right.
still alive. I mean,
Oh, okay.
right now they're still alive, but yes, they're real people. And so, but so, I mean, that it feels like you're talking to an actual person once you start engaging.
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in for a second and ask for you and apologize, because if I think about it for a moment, and I think if there were a hologram of the Hopi Indians, or if there were a hologram of, I, as a child, that might be, it's like going to the Museum of Natural History and you have those statues, and that I like that. So I think I just it just rubbed me wrong, because I'm a knee-jerk kind of person, sometimes without the knee aspect. So it sounds like not so bad.
No, I have to say it's so, I know that the process of, when they were like, I know the survivors who they have videoed, for this, spend days, like weeks, and they're asking and answering every possible question that they think that someone. And so, I mean, I just couldn't believe it when I was having this conversation, because I was like, oh, I'm going to trick, the hologram. No, I mean, every question from like, what did you eat for breakfast is being answered. And so for a child who's not going to have the opportunity to, ever meet a real survivor in person, it's the next best thing that you can do. I mean, obviously you want the real survivor, but in years to come, when there isn't anyone, this is just another step. The museums are the first, obviously, right? But this is another step of proving that this happened, and you can't deny that this happened. And this is a real person who this happened.
Yeah, I think
one thought, because we are in this rather ugly situation of a pandemic, and as I say, in difficulty lies opportunity, that we're in this pandemic, but and another big trauma was the Trump administration. Fortunately, we've now segued to a president that I think is a mensch. I'm not going to too politicize, but at the end of the day, we went from this end to that end pretty quickly. Okay. And secondly, we have the pandemic. So what I'm thinking going forward, because we all like that.
Also have McConnell.
I was just going to say that that in order to have something to look forward to, and picking up, Avi, on your desire to have this notion that everybody should collect each other. I don't know how to put this, but start thinking in a unified, such a strong word, but in some sort of associated. That's a better word, because people aren't going to unify. But if we associate, and my thinking is that perhaps you start reaching out, thinking about the post-pandemic era, the new Biden administration, and to take that and sort of package it, or and use it as a force to show that the Jewish community is not going to sit back and tolerate the anti-Semitism, or for that matter, hatred in society itself, abuse of the Asians, Black Lives Matter. There's plenty to go around. But I always remember Ellie saying, although all victims weren't Jews, all Jews were victims. So you have that contradiction. But I guess where I'm going is to say the idea that we can look forward to the world that has now changed, and to use that as an opportunity for us to associate together. And in the South, in the North, we say schmooze. In the South, they say visit. So maybe what we should do is have a hybrid. We're either going to schmooze, we're going to visit, we're going to associate. And then luckily there is so much to pull together that in a real sense, it's not really that, it may not ever be something we can accomplish, but we could try. So I think, Avi, your spirit is great. And I think that might be the way to, in effect, start the next wave because life has changed so drastically.
I mean, is it wrong, Stephen, to ask you how you would do that?
No, it's not wrong. Well, let me just think. I mean, what comes to mind, for example, I didn't know this even existed, but I'm pretty sure the Hasidic community or the Chabad, they have this annual event in the stadium, the MetLife Stadium in Rutherford, New Jersey, every year. I never knew it existed. So I thought, okay, here's the point.
That's why they brought COVID to New York.
Yeah, no, but my point is, but that's the problem is that we can't, that's why I said post-pandemic, Eleanor, because we can't get together. We're not supposed to be together.
No,
So-
but I mean, look, these Zooms,
here we are.
Zooms are it's better than being in a room. I mean,
okay, I get that. But we're talking massive numbers of people.
Well, but don't you kind of begin, let's say, with a dozen organizations?
No, that's what I'm saying. No, absolutely. I'm saying exactly. In other words, we have the opportunity because we can't get together. So what I'm saying is that you use this in effect to start, if you will, a grassroots program, intersectional, whatever words you want, interstitial. There's all these nice words. Basically, everybody's saying, look, you do that, you do this, you should all do whatever you're doing, and we should just associate. I think that's a nice, harmless word. Just like this.
Affiliate. Hey, maybe we can get the second gentleman of the United States of America to help the head.
But specifically, Eleanor,
what's wrong with Blinken, who is a son of survivors? What's wrong with the Attorney General?
I think they're busy.
Survivors. What about all of the marriage into the Biden family? They're all Jews.
Right, but that's my point.
And Yellen, I mean, this is an amazing business.
So maybe the way to think of this,
trying to say things.
Eleanor, I'll be quiet right at this point. Maybe what we're really thinking about is a campaign, and we don't know what victory is going to be, but we're going to say to ourselves, we're going to have a campaign about the world after the Holocaust, after the pandemic, and how our education, our life experience, our emotions can be channeled to, in effect, make the world better, which I think, Avi, has always been your goal. So maybe that's the way to think about it, is just to think about associating and post-pandemic, and to do it in a way that, has a kind of a mission that will just start,
I mean,
now.
I like that so much. I
love that.
Something called
a campaign. It's a campaign.
Association. I mean, the association, and what is this? I'm part of the association. I'm part of the association.
You are.
Right.
And what's wrong?
Black is part of the association. Asian is part of the association.
And again, when you think about it, and then I'll let you jump in, but when you think about Biden's message, it was about hope and faith. So what we're really doing is taking that. And
there's a great deal. Look, I'm thinking also as a psychologist here. And I'm thinking.
I don't think so. Go ahead.
I'm allowed.
Yeah.
You said you're a lawyer.
You had a little side funny over there.
No. But first of all, let's. I have several ideas. I don't want to miss them. First of all, we created this webinar. At the center, we are planning a series of webinars, regular webinars. So this could be one of them. And we create webinars not off the center, but with anyone that. Okay, so that's a possibility. I'm throwing that possibility. But I really don't want us to not hear one of the messages, which the psychological message is, even if I'm wrong, that on the one hand, we are thinking about the world without survivors. And on the other hand, we're saying, and how are we going to remain together? It's going to be a terrible tragedy. Who is going to be the conscience? Because in many ways, the survivors have been the moral authority, right? They could say, we know we were there. And with all the respect to 2Gs, 3Gs, 4Gs, forever, not every 2G or 3G wants to be involved in a mission.
It's true. It's very true.
And it's not up to anybody on this earth to say you must. Right? The people who are here chose to do it.
So, final thoughts, guys, because we're about at an hour since our late start. I just would love to hear your final thoughts. Leah, you want to start us off since it's been a while since we've heard you? Unmute yourself and back off the computer a little. No, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
Now I'm gonna. I've been trying desperately to do this, but I finally just wrote a note. That said the association should have a speakers bureau. Okay. And I think that's very important because the speakers bureau can be more than one group. I mean, I remember when I went to school, which was 1,000 years ago, where we had classes called civics. Remember that? Where we taught values and we taught respect and tolerance for others and understand that. And I will say that until the last breath of my life, that is what we need to do. And on a personal note, I think that's where we should go. And if you really want this association, you have to have a speakers bureau that will go out to do speaking on our behalf. I think that's very important. And I wish you all a very, very good. I mean, it's been a pleasure, and I learned how to listen more than speak, which is very unusual for me. However, okay, but I will allow that because we all have lots to say, and everything is valid anyway. It doesn't matter. So, as I'm concerned, I'm going to be I'm going to cut myself off. But thank you so much for the opportunity, allowing me to be with you, and please allow me to be of help to you and a resource as I have been with all the love that I got from my family. It's always the way I'm going to be, and that's it. Schoen Fartig, it's me. That's it. And Eleanor, I still want to know how you were living in my family with that show, because that was so much a part of my life. I really was. My father was married before. It was exactly that. So be well, everybody. Love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah.
Stay in touch.
Stacey,
Is everybody allowing Avi to share the emails?
yes, of course.
Yeah, we already have.
You already have them. You've already got the emails from everybody.
That's how we
Stacey, you
got
want to
here.
give us some final thoughts?
Sure. I think, there's a lot. I think that, like everyone's been saying, there's so much hope. And I do think that because we have a foundation of all these different museums already that will be here, for generations to come. And we do, yes, not every single 2G or 3G or 4G is going to tell our story, but yet again, not every survivor wanted to talk either. And I think there are enough people who feel strongly that this will never be forgotten, and that, everyone has such unique ideas. I mean, look what we've come up with just during this, that I think that there's hope in that, as we go forward more and more, this will become part of, their next generation's lives, that they're going to be learning this.
Eleanor, what do you think? Final thoughts.
Something that Stephen said, I think about, I just kind of went blank, which is, it was based on something you said, Stephen, and
Something helpful, I hope.
it was helpful, but Kenneth, you think
Association?
The
All right, well, I'll tell you
association.
what. I'll prod your
you go, and
memory.
I'll come back.
Yeah,
to
well, yeah,
myself.
we'll get back to you. I was just
Yeah.
going to say simply that, maybe what we could do is think about this as the OI Association, but I'm so glad you understood the idea of the association. One. Two, I don't want to beat up on this, but the idea, instead of the QAnon, we could be the Jewanon. I mean, in other words,
Wait, no.
no, but I don't mean to make light of it, because that's a serious thing. The thing is, we have to get away and make people understand there's this reality, not an alt reality. And one of the most real parts of the world's history is the Holocaust. So we got to rebut the alt reality, my fellow lawyer, and to go forward with an association and to build up that, groundswell while we have the time. They say the time to fix the roof is when the sun shines in. This is an opportunity. We can start building very, very slowly, very, very, reaching out. Just put out the word. It almost sounds like the mafia, and it's not what it's going to be. But the idea is, what are you doing? We're creating an association. What does that mean? You're a Jew. You need to be involved. And whatever your area of expertise is within the Jewish community will be respected. So whether I was involved with AIPAC, I've obviously been political all my life. You know, I've done different charities, friends of all the different Jewish charities. I mean, the fact of the matter is we have so many people that we can bring into this funnel, if you will. But I like the idea that we all agree it's an association. It's harmless. It's not scary. And we have a brand. And what's the brand? The brand is it's all of us putting our arms around each other and to somehow get past what has clearly been a very tough period. And the Holocaust is the reality that will remind people that there's no such thing as an alt reality.
I remember a little bit now, and it in part has to do with these 4 years and what it was like these 4 years and what it was like as a Holocaust person during these 4 years and seeing smoke and smelling smoke and hearing footsteps and people saying, well, no, it's not anything, you know, and so I think teaching the Holocaust has to do with making people aware of the signs of what to look out for. So it's not too late. It's preparation. It's a skill set of some kind. It's learning how to see.
Well, actually, you may have just branded us, Eleanor. I like that. It's not too late.
Oh, I love that.
It's not.
Say that again?
It's not too late.
Not too late.
That's our association. The association is built on the concept. It's not too late.
And I just would also like to, I in my mind, I would wish it was not just for Jews, but that to me is like, you know, the people, I'm just going to take off on a tiny tangent. When you write like on Facebook and you say something about calling the former president a fascist or God forbid a Nazi, or calling the Proud Boys Nazis, and then this whole slew of Jewish people comes down on you and says, these are not Nazis. Don't you know what Nazis are? Yeah, Nazis are fascists. You know, I mean, just that the Holocaust is not uber precious, and it isn't something that just belongs to us. It's not like it's ours, that we're not allowed to use it as a light for other horrors. And I don't know if you guys agree with that.
But that brings me back to the idea of education, because we're all learning 6 million, 6 million, 6 million, 6 million. But what we don't learn is that there were another 6 million non-Jews who were murdered, and there were 52 million people who died in World War II. So you know, we need to, you're right, we need to get past the exclusivity of only the Jewish experience and really start breaking out to where Yael and Stephen are going into this association of more. But I want to leave my thoughts for the end. So Yael, you're the last up. Your final thoughts.
I like association, but while you're talking, I'm thinking of Israel, where you had 4 elections.
And we can't talk, the association can include Israel.
Yeah.
Except for Israel. We could deal with every other country in the world, Antarctica.
Your father in the play visited Israel, and it was very dear to him.
I love it myself, but you know.
Yes, I know. And this is extremely important, because I totally concur with the need. Right? And I would love to have, to have all of us embrace each other. But the moment, but I also am very cognizant of course, I'm Israeli too. I'm cognizant of Israel. I'm cognizant of the Congress of the United States. Sorry, and there's one thing, there are 2 things I want to leave us with. It's a wonderful meeting in the sense of we are infusing each other with hope, which is, God bless you. at the same time, I keep hearing Ellie's voice. We have no words, which, by the way, he believed until he died. So in some ways, we still don't have words for a lot of stuff that we believe we know so intimately. And on the other hand, it's like I'm totally undone by what I believe is the genuine impossibility of mourning, and the tragedy. Actually, Avi, you this afternoon said something about really blew me off. Something about only now are we approximating the number of Jews that lived before the Holocaust.
Well, no. We are only now. There were, we lost 6 million. If those 6 million had lived, we would now be well over 100 million Jews in the world. And now, only now, all these years later, are we starting to reach the numbers of population that we had before the war. So, we lost 70, 80 years of population growth. We lost all the contributions of those 100 million potential lives that would have given us plays and doctors and, the cure for cancer or whatever it is. But Yael, please finish, because then I need to bring
just to finish that sentence. So if you call it, it's not too late. So it's not too late to keep crying too. If
wow.
it's okay.
That's a profound thought. What a profound thought. I first of all, I want to thank all of you for what I think was a really stimulating conversation. That's what I was hoping for. We didn't solve the problems, but boy, maybe the association, it's not too late, is a way for us to try to coordinate some kind of an effort. My feeling is, I didn't want to get into politics, but you guys dragged me into it. So I'm gonna just say one thing.
He's going to run for office.
Well, I don't think I'm the right person.
You'd be a great candidate, Avi.
But I do think that it is time for a new political party that is centered around the human experience. I would like to create the human party, because we've had enough with the left and the right and the right and the left and this one and that one. Why can't we have a party that is concerned about the human experience? So that's one element of a potential political influence. The second element is something I think of as a center, and maybe it's the association, a center for human arts and inspiration. The idea that we need to create a cultural center that can deal with the idea that, Jews are creative. The kids in Rwanda did art that was extraordinary. And the Yazidis and the Uyghurs and every single culture in the world has something to say about the human experience and the concept of inspiring people to be better than they are, and get better and better all the time. And those are the things that I am trying to accomplish through the Yiddishkeit Initiative and Why I Love Jewish and the work that we do with our organization. So I want to thank all of you for not only being my friends, and Stacy, we've only just met, but I hope it's the beginning of a friendship.
Yeah.
It's so nice to meet
I was going to say, it would be nice to do a standing ovation, but then we would show off the rest of ourselves, which may be embarrassing. So,
I'm wearing
You're not wearing pants?
No, I am, absolutely. But I just feel like how funny this, but think about it. That's the only thing they didn't figure out in the Zoom. You can't do it in the Zoom. You can't do it.
That's why I needed to say respect.
So I guess what we have to do is we have to satisfy ourselves that we could do a sitting ovation.
Avi,
yes.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Avi.
For setting this up, and
absolutely.
for arranging, for having this idea because it is so stimulating and thoughtful and thought-provoking and hopeful. I mean, I'm not a hopeful person by nature. It's so delightful to have been a part of this tonight, really.
Thank you. Oh, I'm very honored to have each and every one of you. So thank you very much. And I hope it's the first of many. I don't think it's the end. I think this is just the beginning. I think it's really just the beginning. So I thank you all.